When we think of ancient Egypt, we immediately picture colossal pyramids, golden pharaohs, and mysterious hieroglyphs carved into stone. Yet the story of this civilization begins thousands of years earlier, in the fertile valleys of the Nile River. Egypt's origins are deeply tied to this life-giving river, which transformed the desert into one of the most prosperous cradles of human civilization. The Nile, the source of life. The annual flooding of the Nile, predictable and generous, deposited nutrient-rich silt across the floodplains. Unlike the violent and unpredictable rivers of Mesopotamia, the Nile was seen as a benevolent force. It created stable conditions for agriculture, allowing communities to thrive as early as 6000 BCE. Villages formed along its banks, cultivating wheat, barley, and flax, and domesticating animals such as cattle and goats. Over centuries, these agricultural settlements grew into powerful chiefdoms. By around 3100 BCE, Egypt was divided into Upper Egypt, the southern Nile Valley, and Lower Egypt, the northern Delta region. Each region had its own crown, traditions, and rulers. The great milestone came when King Narmer, also known as Menes, unified the two lands around 3100 BCE. This act of unification is often considered the true birth of ancient Egypt as a centralized kingdom, setting the foundation for nearly 3,000 years of civilization. The Old Kingdom, Age of Pyramids, 2686 to 2181 BCE, this period is remembered as Egypt's golden age of construction. Pharaohs such as Djoser, who commissioned the first step pyramid at Saqqara designed by the legendary architect Imhotep, established the tradition of monumental tombs. Later, under the Fourth Dynasty, the iconic pyramids at Giza were built: the Great Pyramid of Khufu, the Pyramid of Khafre, and the Pyramid of Menkaure. These structures were not only burial sites but also symbols of divine kingship, representing the pharaoh as the mediator between gods and humans. The Old Kingdom also saw the rise of a sophisticated administrative system. Viziers, scribes, and local governors managed taxation, irrigation projects, and record-keeping. However, by 2181 BCE, internal strife, decentralization of power, and possible climate change leading to famine caused the collapse of the Old Kingdom, ushering in the First Intermediate Period. The Middle Kingdom, restoration and expansion, 2055 to 1650 BCE, order was restored by Mentuhotep II, who reunified Egypt around 2055 BCE, beginning the Middle Kingdom. This era emphasized rebuilding the state and expanding its borders. Pharaohs such as Senusret III launched military campaigns into Nubia, securing valuable resources like gold and exotic goods. The Middle Kingdom also promoted literature, producing works like the Tale of Sinew, which explored themes of loyalty and identity. But Egypt's growing wealth attracted foreign interest. By 1650 BCE, invaders known as the Hyksos, a Semitic people from the Levant, used superior weapons like horse-drawn chariots to conquer the delta. Egypt entered a new period of foreign rule, marking another transition in its long history. The New Kingdom, an empire of power, 1550 to 1070 BCE, eventually, native Egyptian rulers from Thebes expelled the Hyksos and founded the New Kingdom, Egypt's most powerful and expansive era. Pharaohs such as Thutmose III transformed Egypt into a true empire, extending control into Canaan, Syria, and deep into Nubia. This was also the age of legendary rulers like Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh who launched ambitious trade expeditions, and Ramses II, the Great, who fought the famous Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites. The New Kingdom was marked by wealth, monumental temples like Karnak and Luxor, and the construction of grand tombs in the Valley of the Kings, where Tutankhamun's golden treasures would one day capture modern imaginations. But this glory did not last forever. Invasions by the Sea Peoples, internal corruption, and economic decline weakened Egypt, leading eventually to foreign domination. Religion and culture. Religion in ancient Egypt was not merely a private belief system, it was the very fabric of society. The Egyptians saw the world as a delicate balance between order, Ma'at, and chaos, Isfet. To preserve Ma'at was the ultimate duty of the pharaoh, priests, and ordinary people alike. A pantheon of gods. Egyptian religion was polytheistic, with a vast pantheon of deities tied to natural forces and cosmic order. Ra, the sun god, sailed across the sky each day in his solar bark and descended into the underworld at night. Osiris, god of the afterlife, ruled over the dead, while his wife Isis symbolized magic and motherhood. Horus, the falcon-headed god, embodied kingship, and every pharaoh was considered the living Horus on earth. Temples were not only places of worship but also centers of economic power. They owned land, collected taxes, and employed thousands of workers. The daily rituals performed by priests, such as the offering of food and incense to statues of gods, were believed to maintain cosmic harmony. The afterlife and mummification for Egyptians, death was not an end but a transition. They believed that the soul, or Ka, continued after death, but only if the body was preserved and the proper rituals were followed. This belief gave rise to the practice of mummification, an elaborate process that prepared the body for eternity. Tombs were filled with treasures, food, and texts like the Book of the Dead, which contained spells to guide the deceased through the perilous journey of the afterlife. The construction of pyramids, mastabas, and later rock-cut tombs reflected this deep concern with the afterlife. Each tomb was a miniature universe, designed to ensure the deceased's rebirth alongside the gods. Art, writing, and daily life. Egyptian culture also left behind some of the most distinctive art in human history. From colossal statues of pharaohs to intricate wall paintings and tombs, their art was highly symbolic. Hieroglyphic writing, developed around 3200 BCE, recorded not only royal decrees and religious texts but also poetry, medical treatises, and mathematical documents. The Rosetta Stone, discovered in 1799, eventually unlocked the secrets of this ancient script. Daily life for ordinary Egyptians revolved around farming, family, and community festivals. Music, dance, and beer were central to celebrations, while children played with toys remarkably similar to those we know today. Even in the shadow of colossal monuments, the voices of everyday people echoed through folk tales, songs, and letters preserved on papyrus. Religion as political power. Religion was inseparable from politics. The pharaoh was considered both king and god, the earthly embodiment of Horus and the son of Ra. His legitimacy rested not just on military might but on religious ideology. Major building projects, such as temples to Ammonius Ra at Karnak, reinforced this divine authority. During the reign of Akhenaten, 1353 to 1336 BCE, an extraordinary religious revolution attempted to replace Egypt's polytheism with the worship of a single god, Aten, the sun disk. However, after his death, traditional religion quickly returned, showing how deeply rooted the old beliefs were. When we imagine law in the ancient world, we often think of the famous Code of Hammurabi from Babylon, carved into stone with precise rules and punishments. Egypt, however, took a different path. Unlike its Mesopotamian neighbors, ancient Egypt never codified its laws into a single written code. Instead, the Egyptian system of justice rested on a principle far older and more spiritual, Ma'at. Ma'at was more than an abstract idea, it was the very heartbeat of Egyptian civilization. Represented as a goddess with a feather on her head, Ma'at embodied truth, justice, balance, and order. Every pharaoh swore to uphold Ma'at, for without it, chaos, Isfet, would consume society. Courts, legal disputes, taxation, even irrigation schedules for the Nile all revolved around this sacred principle. To live in harmony with Ma'at was to live in harmony with the universe itself. At the top of Egypt's administrative pyramid stood the vizier, the second most powerful figure after the pharaoh. The vizier acted as chief minister, overseeing agriculture, treasury, justice, and infrastructure. Historical records describe the vizier as the eyes and ears of the pharaoh, ensuring that every decree was carried out across the two lands. Viziers presided over the high court, judged disputes between nobles, and issued rulings based not on rigid written codes but on fairness and precedent. One of the most famous viziers was Rekhmire, who served under Thutmose III and Amenhotep II during the New Kingdom. His tomb in Thebes records not only scenes of grandeur but also detailed instructions about justice, reminding officials never to favor the rich over the poor and always to protect the vulnerable. Below the vizier, Egypt was divided into provinces known as nomes, each governed by a nomarch. In theory, nomarchs served the pharaoh, but in practice, their power fluctuated. During strong central reigns, they acted as loyal administrators. During weak dynasties, they became semi-independent rulers, sometimes challenging royal authority. This tension was particularly visible during the First Intermediate Period, 2181 to 2055 BCE, when the collapse of the Old Kingdom left nomarchs in control of their provinces, weakening unity until the Middle Kingdom restored order. No bureaucracy could function without scribes, the lifeblood of Egyptian administration. Trained from youth, scribes mastered hieroglyphs and hieratic script, recording everything from grain harvests and tax accounts to marriage contracts and court proceedings. With their reed pens and papyrus scrolls, they preserved Egypt's memory. A famous proverb from the New Kingdom advised, "Man dies, his body turns to dust, all his kin perish, but writings make him remembered." In a way, scribes held more power than warriors, for without them, the economy and justice system would collapse. This intricate bureaucracy, rooted in Ma'at, upheld by viziers, nomarchs, and scribes, allowed Egypt to remain remarkably stable for centuries, even in times of drought, invasion, or dynastic change. The story of Egyptian politics is the story of its pharaohs, divine kings who stood at the crossroads between gods and men. Unlike ordinary rulers, the pharaoh was not merely a political leader. He was believed to be a living god, the incarnation of Horus on earth and the son of Ra, entrusted with maintaining Ma'at across the cosmos. To obey the pharaoh was to obey the gods themselves. The Old Kingdom, 2686 to 2181 BCE, the Pyramid Age. This was the age of monumental ambition, when kings like Djoser and Khufu projected their divine power through colossal tombs of stone. The Old Kingdom pharaohs centralized power, drawing resources from across Egypt to build the pyramids of Giza, which still stand as eternal symbols of royal authority. Yet this concentration of power also sowed seeds of fragility. As resources strained under massive building projects and nomarchs grew more independent, the state weakened. By around 2181 BCE, Egypt fractured into smaller kingdoms during the First Intermediate Period, marking the end of centralized Old Kingdom power. The Middle Kingdom, 2055 to 1650 BCE, reunification and renewal order returned under Mentuhotep II of Thebes, who reunified Egypt and launched the Middle Kingdom. Unlike the remote god kings of the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom pharaohs cultivated a more paternal image, the pharaoh as a shepherd, a father to his people. They expanded Egypt's borders into Nubia, securing gold mines, and developed irrigation projects to stabilize food supplies. Literature also flourished, with works like the Instruction of Amenemhat emphasizing loyalty and the duties of a just ruler. The Middle Kingdom represented a balance between central authority and local governance, but by the late 17th century BCE, Egypt faced a new threat. The New Kingdom, 1550 to 1070 BCE, an empire of glory after driving out the Hyksos, Egypt entered its most powerful phase, the New Kingdom. The pharaohs of this era were not just kings, they were warrior emperors and divine reformers. Hatshepsut, 1479 to 1458 BCE, one of the few female pharaohs, she proved her legitimacy by commissioning massive temples and monuments, while also expanding Egypt's wealth through long-distance trade, including a legendary expedition to the land of Punt. Akhenaten, 1353 to 1336 BCE, a visionary or heretic, he attempted to revolutionize Egyptian religion by promoting the worship of Aten, the sun disk, as the sole god. His reign disrupted traditional priestly power but collapsed after his death. Tutankhamun, 1332 to 1323 BCE, though he reigned only briefly, his untouched tomb, discovered in 1922, immortalized him as one of history's most famous pharaohs. Ramses II, 1279 to 1213 BCE, known as Ramses the Great, he was both a master builder and a formidable warrior. His reign saw the construction of monumental temples like Abu Simbel and the signing of the first known peace treaty in history, after the epic Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites. During the New Kingdom, Egypt projected power across the Near East, commanding tribute from vassal states and dazzling the ancient world with wealth and splendor. The pharaoh became not only the protector of Egypt but the symbol of its imperial destiny. Divine kingship and loyalty at the heart of Egyptian politics was the fusion of religion and monarchy. Pharaohs were gods in human form, and their rule was sanctified by rituals that bound heaven and earth. To rebel against the pharaoh was not merely treason, it was blasphemy. This divine kingship created extraordinary stability but also vulnerability. When foreign powers like the Assyrians, Persians, and later the Romans invaded, the fall of the pharaoh was felt as a cosmic rupture, the collapse of Ma'at itself. The lifeblood of ancient Egypt's economy was the Nile River, a gift of nature that transformed arid desert into fertile farmland and made Egypt one of the most prosperous civilizations of the ancient world. Every year, the Nile flooded its banks, depositing rich black silt onto the floodplain. This annual rhythm, predictable, life-giving, almost divine, ensured that Egyptian farmers could produce abundant harvests. Without the Nile, there would have been no Egypt. With it, the Egyptians built not only a stable food supply, but also an economy that fueled monumental construction, thriving trade, and the rise of one of history's greatest empires. Agriculture, the foundation of wealth. Agriculture was at the core of Egyptian prosperity. Farmers grew barley, wheat, flax, and vegetables, while orchards produced dates, figs, and pomegranates. Barley and wheat were essential not only as food but as the foundation of the economy itself, since grain functioned both as sustenance and as a form of currency. Workers on royal projects were often paid in rations of bread and beer, staples of the Egyptian diet. Flax was another crucial crop, used to produce linen, the fabric of daily clothing as well as temple rituals. Linen was not only worn but also exported abroad, valued by neighboring regions for its fine quality. Farmers also raised livestock, cattle, sheep, goats, and geese, providing meat, milk, leather, and wool. The agricultural cycle was carefully managed by scribes, who measured flood levels, recorded harvests, and collected grain for royal granaries. The pharaoh's control over grain was both practical and political. In times of famine, stored grain could be redistributed, reinforcing the pharaoh's role as a divine protector. In times of plenty, surplus grain became a powerful tool for trade, exchanged for luxury goods that Egypt could not produce itself. Internal trade and craft specialization within Egypt, goods flowed from rural farms to bustling urban centers such as Memphis and Thebes, where markets thrived. Farmers brought grain, vegetables, and livestock, while artisans offered pottery, jewelry, leather goods, and woven textiles. These markets were not only economic hubs but also cultural crossroads, where Egyptians of all classes mingled and exchanged ideas. Craft production reached remarkable levels of sophistication. Egyptian artisans mastered goldsmithing, stone carving, pottery, and glasswork. Jewelry adorned with turquoise, lapis lazuli, and carnelian was highly prized, both for personal use and as offerings to the gods. The construction of monumental temples and tombs demanded an entire industry of masons, sculptors, and painters, supported by the agricultural surplus that freed them from farming duties. The city of Deir el-Medina, home to the workers who built the Valley of the Kings, offers a glimpse into this world of specialized labor. Excavations reveal a community of artisans who were paid in rations, engaged in strikes when provisions failed, and left behind records of their daily lives on ostraca. This shows not only the complexity of Egypt's economy but also its human side, the dependence of artisans on the broader system of agricultural wealth and royal administration. International trade networks. Egypt's prosperity was not limited to what the Nile provided. From an early date, the pharaohs looked outward, establishing international trade networks that enriched the kingdom with luxury goods, raw materials, and exotic treasures. Lebanon. From the forests of Lebanon came cedar wood, prized for shipbuilding and temple construction. Because Egypt lacked forests, this timber was essential for building the boats that sailed the Nile and beyond. Nubia, to the south, perhaps Egypt's most valuable trade partner, Nubia supplied gold, ivory, ebony, and exotic animals. Control of Nubia was so crucial that Egyptian armies frequently campaigned there to secure mines and trade routes. Punt, possibly modern Eritrea/Somalia, known as the land of the gods, Punt provided frankincense, myrrh, and aromatic resins used in temple rituals and mummification. Queen Hatshepsut's expedition to Punt around 1470 BCE is one of the most famous episodes of New Kingdom trade, vividly recorded on the walls of her temple at Deir el-Bahari. Sinai, Egypt mined copper and turquoise from the Sinai Peninsula, vital for tools, weapons, and jewelry. Expeditions to Sinai are recorded as early as the Old Kingdom. The Eastern Mediterranean and Near East. During the New Kingdom, Egypt extended its influence into Syria and Palestine, gaining access to silver, olive oil, wine, horses, and chariots. Diplomatic letters from the Amarna archives, 14th century BCE, reveal pharaohs exchanging gifts with kings of Babylon, Mitanni, and the Hittites. These trade networks not only enriched Egypt materially but also enhanced its prestige. Exotic goods like incense, gold, and lapis lazuli were more than luxuries. They were symbols of Egypt's connection to the wider world and proof of the pharaoh's divine ability to provide abundance. Markets and currency. Egypt did not develop coinage until the late period, under Persian and then Greek influence. Instead, the economy was based on barter and commodity exchange. Grain was the most common medium of value, but other goods such as copper, silver by weight, and linen also functioned as equivalents. Scribes kept meticulous records of these exchanges on papyrus and ostraca, ensuring transparency and accountability in trade. In bustling markets, one could find everything from baskets of onions and fish to finely crafted amulets and luxury perfumes. Temples often acted as economic centers themselves, owning land, collecting tithes, and redistributing goods. Some temples became so wealthy that their economic power rivaled that of the pharaoh. Economy and monumental building. The wealth of Egypt's economy found its most visible expression in monumental architecture. The pyramids of the Old Kingdom, the grand temples of Karnak and Luxor, and the colossal statues of Ramses II were not just religious structures, they were economic projects on a vast scale. Tens of thousands of workers had to be fed, housed, and supplied. Artisans required tools and raw materials. Transportation networks had to move limestone blocks, granite, and timber across hundreds of miles. These projects stimulated the economy, creating employment for farmers during the off-season and mobilizing resources from across the kingdom. They also reinforced the ideology of kingship. Each monument was a visible reminder that the pharaoh, supported by the gods, could command both human and natural resources. Wealth, power, and the military. Egypt's economy was deeply intertwined with its military expansion. Surplus wealth funded armies, and military victories brought back tribute and spoils. During the Middle Kingdom, pharaohs expanded into Nubia not only for political control but also to secure access to gold mines. By the New Kingdom, military conquest had become an engine of the economy itself. Under Thutmose III, 1479 to 1425 BCE, Egypt campaigned as far north as Syria, bringing back tribute in the form of horses, chariots, slaves, and exotic goods. Ramses II, 1279 to 1213 BCE, fought the Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh, after which a peace treaty formalized the exchange of goods and political marriages that furthered economic ties. In this sense, Egypt's economic strength both enabled and depended on its military might. Trade routes needed protection, conquest secured resources, and wealth, in turn, allowed Egypt to project power abroad. Resilience and vulnerability. For all its strength, Egypt's economy was not invincible. Dependence on the Nile meant that failed floods could trigger famine, weakening the state. During the first intermediate period, low floods combined with political fragmentation led to widespread hardship. Later, foreign invasions disrupted trade networks. When the Sea Peoples attacked in the 12th century BCE, Mediterranean trade collapsed, straining Egypt's economy. Yet Egypt proved remarkably resilient. Its bureaucracy, temple system, and reliance on grain as a stable currency allowed it to endure crises that might have destroyed other civilizations. Even under foreign rulers, the Assyrians, Persians, and eventually the Greeks and Romans, Egypt remained a land of agricultural abundance and commercial significance. In sum, the economy and trade of ancient Egypt were not just about wealth, they were about identity and survival. The Nile's gifts provided the foundation, but it was the Egyptian genius for organization, craft, and exchange that transformed those gifts into temples, armies, and an empire. Markets in Memphis and Thebes bustled with goods from across the known world, while expeditions to Nubia and Punt showcased Egypt's global reach. From the farmer tending wheat fields to the artisan crafting a golden amulet, from the vizier overseeing taxation to the pharaoh presiding over monumental construction, every level of society was tied into this intricate web of production and exchange. Decline and foreign invasions of ancient Egypt. For more than 3,000 years, Egypt had stood as one of the most dazzling civilizations in human history. The Nile nourished its fields, the pyramids crowned its deserts, and the pharaohs ruled as gods on earth. Yet even the mightiest empires eventually bend beneath the weight of time, internal struggles, and the ambitions of rivals. Egypt was no exception. Its decline was not sudden but unfolded in stages, each marked by turbulence, foreign intrusion, and the gradual erosion of pharaonic power. The first major crack in Egypt's political unity came during the Second Intermediate Period, 1650 to 1550 BCE. After the glories of the Middle Kingdom, Egypt weakened from within. Local rulers grew powerful, the centralized authority of the pharaoh diminished, and foreign peoples found their way into the Nile Delta. Chief among them were the Hyksos, a Semitic group from the Levant. They brought with them revolutionary technologies, the horse-drawn chariot, composite bows, and new forms of bronze weaponry. To the Egyptians, who had relied on simpler arms, these innovations were a shock. The Hyksos not only infiltrated but managed to conquer Lower Egypt, establishing their own dynasty at Avaris. For nearly a century, the once proud Egyptian kingdom found itself ruled by foreign kings. Yet this humiliation also became a turning point. Egyptian leaders in Thebes, particularly Ahmosai, adapted to the new military technology, reorganized their forces, and eventually expelled the Hyksos around 1550 BCE. Their victory inaugurated the New Kingdom, Egypt's most powerful era. Still, the memory of this invasion lingered, foreshadowing the vulnerabilities that would resurface centuries later. By the end of the New Kingdom, after the reigns of great conquerors like Ramses II, Egypt began to fragment again. Economic strain, costly wars abroad, and growing power among high priests and local governors weakened the central throne. This led to what historians call the Third Intermediate Period, 1070 to 664 BCE, an age when Egypt was politically divided, with rival dynasties ruling from Thebes, Tanis, and other centers. In this fractured state, Egypt was increasingly exposed to external threats. The most decisive wave of foreign domination came during the late period, 664 to 332 BCE. At first, Egypt enjoyed a brief revival under rulers like Psamtik I, who reunited the land and tried to restore its former glory. But the geopolitical reality had shifted. The Near East was dominated by empires far more aggressive and militarily advanced. The Assyrians struck first. In 671 BCE, King Esarhaddon of Assyria invaded and captured Memphis, briefly controlling Egypt. Later, in 667 BCE, Ashurbanipal returned to reassert Assyrian dominance, reminding Egypt that its independence hung by a thread. Following the Assyrians, a new eastern power emerged, the Persian Empire. Under Cambyses II, Persia invaded in 525 BCE and made Egypt a satrapy, or province, of the vast Achaemenid Empire. The Persians respected Egypt's traditions to some degree, but Egyptian nationalism simmered, and revolts were frequent. Brief periods of independence flickered, most notably under native kings like Amritius of the 28th dynasty, but these were short-lived. By the time of Artaxerxes III in the 4th century BCE, Egypt was once again securely under Persian rule. Then, in 332 BCE, a new conqueror strode into history, Alexander the Great. Marching swiftly through the Persian Empire, he entered Egypt not as an oppressor but as a liberator from Persian rule. Welcomed as a savior, he was declared the son of the god Ammonius at the Oracle of Siwa, further legitimizing his rule. Alexander founded Alexandria, a city destined to become a beacon of Hellenistic culture. With his arrival, Egypt transitioned from native dynasties to the Ptolemaic era, ruled by Greeks who adopted many Egyptian customs while blending them with their own. For nearly 3 centuries, the Ptolemaic dynasty governed Egypt. It was a period of cultural fusion, scientific achievement, and also political intrigue. The last great figure of this age was Cleopatra VII, who sought to preserve Egypt's independence through both diplomacy and alliances with Rome. Yet her tragic defeat alongside Mark Antony at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE sealed Egypt's fate. In 30 BCE, Egypt was formally annexed by Rome, marking the end of over 3,000 years of pharaonic rule. The once divine rulers of the Nile were replaced by Roman governors, and Egypt became the empire's breadbasket, prized for its grain. Despite this political downfall, Egypt never truly disappeared. Its monuments continued to awe visitors, its religious symbols influenced Roman and later cultures, and its wisdom, mathematical, medical, and mystical, was woven into the intellectual heritage of the Mediterranean world. The story of Egypt's decline is thus not one of sudden collapse but of transformation. From Hyksos chariots to Persian satraps, from Alexander's conquest to Rome's annexation, each wave of invasion reshaped the land of the Nile. The pharaohs fell, but the legacy of Egypt endured, whispering through the sands of time. One of ancient Egypt's most profound legacies lies in its system of writing. The hieroglyphs, with their intricate blend of pictorial and phonetic symbols, were not simply a means of communication. They were a bridge between the mortal world and the divine, recording hymns to the gods, prayers for the dead, and the eternal deeds of the pharaohs. Monumental inscriptions carved into tombs and temples ensured that names and stories would survive long after flesh turned to dust. Today, thanks to the discovery of the Rosetta Stone in 1799 and the eventual decipherment of hieroglyphs by Jean-François Champollion in 1822, we can read the voices of a civilization more than 4,000 years old. Hieroglyphs gave us the Book of the Dead, a guide to the afterlife, and countless royal decrees, myths, and poems. Their survival allows modern scholars to reconstruct Egyptian thought, economy, and daily life, ensuring that Egypt's memory is not buried by time. Beyond their historical value, the Egyptian approach to writing inspired the very concept of recording law, history, and science in durable form, a foundation upon which later civilizations, from Greece to Rome, built their literate traditions. Unlike Babylon, Egypt never produced a codified legal system like Hammurabi's laws. Instead, their governance was rooted in Ma'at, the principle of cosmic balance, truth, and justice. Ma'at was not only a religious ideal but also a practical guide for human behavior and governance. Pharaohs swore to uphold Ma'at, judges invoked it in trials, and common people understood it as the glue that held society together. This idea of justice as a reflection of universal balance deeply influenced later civilizations. It resonates even today in modern legal systems that emphasize fairness, equity, and moral order. The image of the weighing of the heart, where the deceased's soul is balanced against the feather of Ma'at, continues to inspire art and philosophy, symbolizing the timeless human yearning for justice. No legacy of Egypt is more visible, or more awe-inspiring, than its architecture. The pyramids of Giza, the towering obelisks, the sprawling temples of Karnak and Luxor, and the grand mortuary complexes of the Valley of the Kings still dominate the desert landscape. These structures were not mere shelters but cosmic machines, designed to link heaven and earth, life and afterlife, mortals and gods. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, constructed around 2560 BCE, remains one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and the only one still standing. Its precision and scale continue to baffle engineers and architects. Obelisks, with their soaring shafts of granite, became symbols of solar worship, later adopted by Rome. And even modern capitals like Paris, London, and Washington, D.C., where Egyptian obelisks, or their replicas, still proclaim power and eternity. Egyptian architectural innovations in stone construction, symmetry, and symbolism influenced Greek temples, Roman engineering, and even modern monumental architecture. Skyscrapers, museums, and memorials around the world still borrow the aesthetic language of Egypt: massive scale, axial symmetry, and enduring stone. Egypt was not only a land of mysticism but also of scientific innovation. The cycles of the Nile demanded careful observation of nature, leading Egyptians to develop advanced methods of mathematics and astronomy. They divided the circle into 360 degrees, invented a calendar of 365 days, and pioneered the division of time into hours and minutes, concepts we still use daily. In medicine, Egyptian physicians practiced a blend of spiritual healing and empirical observation. Papyrus scrolls such as the Ebers Papyrus, circa 1550 BCE, contain hundreds of remedies for ailments ranging from wounds to infertility. They recognized the importance of the pulse, conducted early forms of surgery, and used herbal treatments still valued in traditional medicine. Their engineering genius is equally evident in irrigation systems, quarrying techniques, and monumental construction methods. Modern science and technology still look back to Egypt not merely as a source of myth but as a pioneer of practical knowledge. Perhaps Egypt's richest and most enduring legacy lies in its mythology and religion. The stories of Osiris, Isis, Horus, and Set were not only sacred to the Egyptians but also profoundly shaped later religious thought. The themes of death, resurrection, divine kingship, and cosmic struggle echo through Greek mystery cults, Roman religion, and even Abrahamic traditions. The myth of Osiris, who was murdered, resurrected, and became ruler of the underworld, bears striking similarities to later stories of dying and rising gods. The protective figure of Isis became one of the most popular deities of the Roman Empire, her worship spreading far beyond Egypt. Some scholars even suggest that early Christian imagery of the Virgin Mary with the infant Jesus was influenced by depictions of Isis cradling Horus. Thus, Egypt's mythology transcended its deserts, shaping the religious imagination of the Mediterranean world and leaving an indelible mark on the spiritual history of humanity. Egypt's art, characterized by its strict proportions, vivid colors, and symbolic richness, remains iconic. From the golden mask of Tutankhamun to the painted tomb walls of the Valley of the Kings, Egyptian artistry continues to inspire awe. Its influence can be traced in Art Deco design, in 19th-century Egyptomania, and in countless films, novels, and games that reimagine the mysteries of the Nile. Museums across the world, from the British Museum to the Louvre, display Egyptian artifacts that attract millions of visitors each year. While this dispersal of treasures is controversial, it demonstrates the global fascination with Egypt's legacy of creativity and beauty. Influence on the modern world. The legacy of ancient Egypt is not frozen in the past, it actively shapes the present. Our concept of time, many principles of architecture, symbols of justice, and even aspects of religion and spirituality bear Egyptian fingerprints. Tourism to Egypt remains one of the strongest bridges between past and present, as millions journey each year to stand before the pyramids, sail along the Nile, or wander through temples built thousands of years ago. In popular culture, Egypt continues to inspire literature, cinema, music, and art. From novels like Death on the Nile to blockbuster films such as The Mummy, Egypt's image as a land of mystery and grandeur remains a source of fascination. Its symbols, the Ankh, the scarab, the Eye of Horus, are reimagined in jewelry, tattoos, and design, proving that Egypt's cultural power has not diminished. Though conquered and transformed, ancient Egypt never truly died. Its writing preserved memory, its laws embodied justice, its architecture defined permanence, its science shaped knowledge, and its mythology captured the eternal human quest for meaning. Today, when we gaze upon the pyramids or trace the hieroglyphs carved into temple walls, we are not merely looking at relics of a vanished age. We are witnessing the roots of civilization itself, a reminder that human creativity and ambition can transcend mortality. In the end, Egypt is more than a chapter in history, it is a symbol of the enduring power of human imagination and achievement. Its legacy is not buried in the sands of time but continues to live with us, shaping the way we measure time, understand justice, construct monuments, heal bodies, and tell stories about gods, kings, and the destiny of humanity.